Someone cutting me off. Not only cutting me off, but cutting me off with a millimeter. I got 3 kids in the car. Millimeter away from me, and then flipping me the bird. Wait, why are you flipping me the bird? I'm like, is it possible? But I'm saying I could look for any.
But I ask a question: can you insult a black person? Can you insult a black person without being a racist? That's just a question.
I think the minute that he went with lazy, he was.
Why are you saying black people are lazy?
No, but that's
why does the word lazy make you think about? No, it is not. I've never been called lazy my entire life. So the question is, why does the word lazy make? No. I'm asking you a question. I asked you a question. You said that lazy makes you think of black people. That's what you're saying.
That is a common racist trope.
So that's within you, not within him. That is not a common racist trope towards black people.
It's incredible that you're defending a man who looks at a pregnant woman.
I think he's a jerk. No. I think he's an absolute jerk. I agree with you. You're trying to be insulting because you're trying to move the ball because you just accidentally called black people lazy. That's what really happened.
I know what you're typical racist.
Okay, it's not a racist trope. Lazy is a word that means that you're not doing all the time.
We gotta stop, guys. It's getting too hot. Okay, but I think this does go to the point that we should be able to have bad days, and people should be able to make mistakes. And he probably made a mistake and was really rude to her, and he admitted it. That doesn't mean he's right. Maybe he is. Maybe no one can know. But the point is, the second an allegation goes on a Facebook Live, whoever makes it, I don't care if it's a conservative or a liberal or someone in between, it's instantly picked up if it's validating a progressive worldview. That's instantly picked up. Got Eric Liu goes on TV, congressman. We had people on television, pundits weighing in. You see, this is what Trump's caused. And I think he seemed to be saying, go back to the other aisle. So now go back to the other aisle is go back to your country, which she changed her story on.
Much more careful with anything that goes viral. And look,
sorry, I didn't say Eric culture.
A lot of the discussions that we have on this very show are a grievance culture in and of itself, just from the other perspective. So the reality is that we have a culture that is incredibly divided, that the debate is coarsened, and you either have a grievance on this side or you have it on that side. And at the end of the day, what you have to do is, I think of Dr. Martin Luther King's call to, you can't drive out darkness with darkness, you have to drive it out with light. And that's where we have to move the country forward, is that we're not attacking each other in this way, where somehow these kinds of confrontations become normal. The police confrontation that you saw earlier, unacceptable.
I think, again, the lack of respect that we talked about on the angle tonight, this is not something that happened overnight. We saw what happened during the Obama years, before Obama, during Bush, during Reagan, before that, going all the way back to the late 1960s. And you go back and you watch that raw footage of that police versus the protesters. They were bad actors on both sides of that, the DNC. That was, that's not very long ago. That's when it all kind of began. And the disrespect cuts across many levels of our society. And it kind of ends up where people feel afraid. A lot of people I know are afraid to say anything. They don't want to share a thought because someone will take it the wrong way. They don't want to, they're afraid to say their opinion on anything. That's also not a good place to be. Candace, I know you've been through, well, also we had breaking news. Candace just gave us this news. Sorry, I forgot. You were blocked tonight. Speaking of, maybe AOC thought you disrespected her. You disrespected AOC?
Yes, I got blocked.
How do you dare do that? You can't
really
do that.
Yes, I called her an intellectual coward because she says a lot of things and she throws a lot of insults, and yet she will not debate anybody. She doesn't want to debate people on the opposite side of the aisle. And I think that if you actually believe what you believe, you would be happy to sit down and have a discussion and a dialogue with somebody to get to the core of whose ideas are better. And I don't believe that she believes anything that she says beyond getting clicks and getting retweets.
I believe she believes. I disagree. I think she believes.
I don't, because why not just show up and have a debate?
Well,
why not debate someone?
Yeah, well, maybe she's not very comfortable in debate, but I think she
calls everyone racist.
Yeah, that's. Unfortunately, that kind of ends the conversation.
It does, instantly, and it's unfortunate. We have to be able to just call somebody lazy. Yeah. We have to be able to just say awful things. We have to be able to be in a bad mood.
All right, Louise,
not everything is racist.
Look, I don't agree with AOC a lot, but I might block you too after this conversation. Because I'm just kidding on that one. But the reality is that the debate has gotten way too coarse, and we need to change it. And I think Democrats, if they're going to beat Donald Trump in November of next year, we can't fall into the same type of rhetoric that we're trying to fight on the Republican side, whether it's about Ivanka or Kellyanne or anybody else.
Okay, guys, we got to go. We're up against hard break. Thank you so much, panel.
Founder of the Brexit Foundation and author of the upcoming book Blackout, here to discuss the racial tensions currently simmering in the U.S. and how African Americans and other minority communities can claim a greater share of the American dream. Please welcome to the program Candace Owens. Candace, thank you for being here. Now, we're hearing consistent cries of systemic racism, Candace, from politicians, from the media. On Tuesday, Attorney General William Barr testified before Congress, and this is what Representative Richmond from right here in Louisiana had to say. Watch.
You started your testimony with eloquent words about the life and legacy of John Lewis fighting systematic racism, voter intimidation, civil rights. The one thing that you have in common with your two predecessors, both Attorney General Sessions and Attorney General Whitaker, is that when you all came here and brought your top staff, you brought no black people. That, sir, is systematic racism. That is exactly what John Lewis spent his life fighting. And so I would just suggest that actions speak louder than words, and you really should keep the name of the Honorable John Lewis out of the Department of Justice's mouth.
Candace, your reaction, and is there systemic or systematic, as the congressman said, racism in the United States?
I mean, it's so hard to listen to stuff like that because it's so obviously dishonest. I mean, what a bizarre thing to say that if you walk into a room and you don't walk in with a person of color, you're perpetuating some sort of systemic racism. Do the same rules apply if you walk into a room and you've got a white person and a black person, but you're lacking an Asian person? I mean, it makes no fundamental sense to say that depending on how many colored people are in the room determines whether or not the room is racist. And this is one of the things that people keep forgetting about America. We live in a majority white country, okay? So if you were in Uganda and you walked into a room and you saw majority black people, that would not be an example of systemic racism against white people. That would be an accurate reflection of the amount of white versus black people that live in the country. What black people are looking for right now, it seems, people like him who are race baiters, is to become a majority in every industry, in every room, on every sports team. And it doesn't work that way when you represent 13% of a population. This is such foolishness.
Candace, we keep hearing this systemic racism, though, that it exists, that it's in play. Do you believe it is? I mean, one could certainly say during the Jim Crow era, when African Americans couldn't vote, that's systemic racism. You have things in the system that are contributing to racism. Now that we've had a black president elected twice, black Supreme Court justices, is systemic racism still a reality today?
It is not a reality. It is the opposite of a reality. It's an illusion that people are holding on to because they don't want to do hard work and they just want to be afforded all of these privileges in life without ever having to work. There is absolutely nothing that I cannot do as a black American in this country that a white American can do. If you can point to me to the law or the practice that's in place that somehow keeps me out based on my character and how hard I work, if there's two people that are working the exact same and putting out the same, exerting the same amount of effort, and you're going to tell me that as a black person I can't get ahead, it doesn't exist. So what they're looking for right now, these race baiters and these race hustlers, is they want more. They want extra credit, right? They want to be privileged. They want to be ahead of people. And that is what's wrong. That is where the real racism is existing. To say to someone, you need to constantly be with a black person. I mean, how foolish is that, Raymond?
I need to play something for you. This is a recent interview with that great interviewer, Seth Meyers. This is MSNBC host Joy Reid, and she was asked about the Black Lives Matter movement. Listen.
Black Lives Matter, it started, during enslavement, right? I mean, Black Lives Matter is an age-old movement that just changes names. It's been the civil rights movement. It's been run by SNCC. It's been run by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. It's been John Lewis's movement. It's been Dr. King's movement.
Is the BLM a continuation of Dr. King's civil rights movement?
Yeah, I'm sure that Dr. King was a supporter of riot, of protesting, of burning down businesses, of killing and slaughtering black Americans in the streets. I'm sure that's really what he was a proponent of when he was standing up on stage, surrounded by white people, saying that we needed more peace. No, people in the civil rights era were actually fighting for something. They were actually fighting to put an end to racist practices. What they were really asking for was for the country to actually recognize the things that are promised and afforded to every human being under the Constitution of the United States. And we weren't getting that. We actually weren't recognizing the words of our own Constitution. And then we suddenly did. And what really happened during that period when blacks were finally granted true freedom in the forms of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is people went, oh my goodness, now I'm suddenly responsible for myself. Now I actually have to put in the work ethic. Now I can't complain or point to a systemic injustice. And then we started seeing this whole era of white guilt, right? Of saying that, well, no matter what any black person does, they're guiltless and they're blameless. And we can point to 400 years of slavery to say that's the reason you got a bad grade on your test. What they're really creating is a system where black Americans are never going to try and therefore never going to get ahead. And that is where the real racism exists. In telling somebody that they're less than repeatedly so they don't even try. And that racism is being executed by and large by the left, by white liberals, and by the Democrat Party.
In the same interview, Joy Reid was asked why we're seeing white people increasingly supporting Black Lives Matter. Listen to what she said.
It's not just a black people concern. This is the public realizing if they're coming for black lives, they're eventually coming for yours. They're eventually coming for your security and peace.
Candace, who are they? What narrative's being created here? And who does it serve?
No idea. I'm assuming they must be the police officers, because since Black Lives Matter right now, their main thing, the big piece of the puzzle is defund the police. The police officers are going to come for your life. Which is just, again, extraordinarily dishonest. And it's incredible to me that these people are allowed to be on the air and allowed to keep spinning these lies. When police officers save lives, right? When the biggest threat to a black person on the streets is another black person, statistically speaking. And nobody wants to have that conversation because, again, this is a narrative. This is not a truth. This is a narrative that is being spun during an election cycle to create division. And so she knows she's being dishonest, and it's incredible to me that she can continue to do that with a straight face, knowing that she's bringing about harm upon the very community that she claims to be speaking on behalf of.
There's a story, Candace, it's gotten almost no media coverage. A black Milwaukee man, Vernell Trammell, who, by the way, was a supporter of Black Lives Matter, he was fatally shot last Thursday while sitting outside of his business. Now, he's often seen wielding large handwritten signs with his personal beliefs in big letters, okay? He supported George Floyd, police reform, and President Donald Trump. Now, it's suspected that his killing may have been politically motivated. Where's the outrage over the loss of this black life? I've heard nothing of it. We don't know his name at all.
Over all of the black lives that are being lost at the hands of other black people and all of these shootings that are happening because now these cities are insecure because of these riots and these protests. It's not just him. David Dorn, the guy that we watched bleed out during the protests and riots when he was a police sergeant his whole life, 77 years old, retired, and gets shot and killed in cold blood because another black person was robbing his store. Where is the outrage for these 1-year-olds and these 2-year-olds that are being killed, with stray bullets on the south side of Chicago, in Baltimore, in Trenton, New Jersey? We've seen tons of these stories that have happened since and because, as a direct result of the fact that criminals are being emboldened by the fact that there are calls to defund the police because they know that there's a vacuum of security where they can raise up and they can execute crimes and they'll be considered blameless and it won't be discussed. Where is the outrage in all of that? There is no outrage because this movement is not about black lives. If it was about black lives and preserving black lives, we'd be having a conversation about black on black crime. They refuse to do that. They call that conversation racist. That really lets you know that what we're seeing happen is black people are being used as pawns to further a political progressive agenda.
What's the role of the black church in all of this, Candace? I've been reading a great deal about, and it's largely white theologians, white writers, bending over backwards to try to somehow accommodate Black Lives Matter, the movement, not the idea, but the movement, into their version of theology or the scriptures. Does the black church and the church at large have a role in restoring true justice in these communities, in our inner cities and in our urban communities?
This is a really difficult question for me to answer, and it's a discussion that I have with my husband all the time, as a Christian. You have to acknowledge that a lot of these progressive values and ideas that we got into in these horrible progressive values and ideas were brought to the Black community via the church. Right, abortion. We know that during the progressive era, Margaret Sanger hatched a plan to go to the Black ministers because she understood, how close the Black community was to their faith. We are the most faithful community in America in terms of church attendance, in terms of believing in God. Black America is the most faithful community, and unfortunately, the left and progressives saw that as an opportunity to pass through bad ideas. I live in Washington, D.C. When I walk past churches and I see LGBT flags and I see Black Lives Matter, fists raised and on these churches, it scares me. It means that right now we're also facing attack not just on the family unit, right, not just on racial harmony, but on the church. And that should be scary for everyone because if you want to watch Western civilization crumble, you need to remember that Western civilization was built on Judeo-Christian beliefs. And so these routine attacks that we're seeing on people that are religious, right, on wanting people to shut down churches, saying that religion is dangerous, and now we're seeing progressive ideals that pass through the church. This is a much larger plan to kill Western society. Western and the principles that govern Western society that make the West the best, that make us different, and that have brought us to this place of greatness that we are in today. The role of the church should be to get back to the teaching of the Bible as it is,
Right.
Not an interpretation, not getting up with the times, not trying to be progressively woke, but teaching the actual content of the Bible. What we're seeing happen in the church should make every single person nervous.
Yeah, and reminding everyone that we're children of God. Forget the race, forget the background of people. We're children of God. If you start there, everything else will take care of itself. But we lose that. Somewhere along the way, that's forgotten, and we start playing these word games. Earlier this month, Candace, Kanye West, who I know you know, announced he was running for president. He had this to say about Planned Parenthood. He said Planned Parenthoods across the country have been placed inside cities by white supremacists to do the devil's work. Now, look, there are questions about whether Kanye is a serious candidate for president or not, but what do you make of him calling out Planned Parenthood? And as you mentioned earlier, this is the organization that tried to distance itself from Margaret Sanger in the wake of those comments and her racist eugenist vision. Does what Kanye say resonate with members of the African American community, do you think?
It certainly needs to, and this really gets back to just Black Americans needing to learn their true history. How many Black Americans do you think actually know that Margaret Sanger was an avowed racist and eugenicist, who was a supporter of the Mississippi appendectomies and wanting women that were Black and impoverished to make sure that they could never have children? She was the person who created Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood still, by and large, executes successfully on her dream. We know that 18 million plus Black babies aborted since 1973 should have everybody alarmed in discussing this. We know that the Black population growth has stagnated. And this is something, at the same time, the irony that they're going around and looking at the history of every company and every brand, and Uncle Ben has got to go, and Aunt Jemima has to go, and the Land O'Lakes lady has got to go, but the Planned Parenthood building still gets to stand. If you're looking into histories that are bad and you're pulling down statues, you're not going to pull down Planned Parenthood clinics. Margaret Sanger, her legacy gets to stand all over Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. These are questions that anybody should be asking. These are good questions to ask, and it should show you that they are here to further a narrative. And it is a narrative that, by and large, always hurts Black Americans. There is something about progressive policies that always lead to aggressive results in the Black community.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And this is, in some ways, this is arresting everybody's attention, one would hope, to the true tragedy and the true racism going on in these Black communities. And it's via the groups you just talked about. We are seeing statues coming down, monuments and streets renamed. This week, Loyola University of Maryland announced that a residence hall named in honor of Catholic writer Flannery O'Connor, the great Southern writer, would be renamed due to recent concerns about her use of racist language in private correspondence when she was a teenager in the 1940s. Now, what's most striking about this is the president of the university, a Father Linan, said this about O'Connor's writings. He said, "I'm not a scholar of Flannery O'Connor, but I've studied her fiction and nonfiction writings. Particularly in her fiction, the dignity of African American persons and their worth is consistently upheld, with the bigots being the object of ridicule. Does it make sense to cancel one of our greatest Southern authors? I mean, I guess Tennessee Williams, Capote, Twain are next here.
Well, they are. That's already happening. It's not next. It's already happening. On college campuses, John Locke. These are all of these people, all of these authors that I grew up reading in school are being canceled. They're not learning that stuff. They're being instead replaced with postmodern artists, postmodern writers and postmodern artists, and these are what the kids are studying. So you want to know why you have so many people that are supporting this? They're learning this actively in school. Of course, she shouldn't be canceled. Of course, every single person, especially when you go back to a time where slavery was all over the world, you're going to find people whose characters are conflicted, whose actions were conflicted. But does that take away from their work? Should we not study their work? Should we pretend history never happened? I mean, because that's what they're after. They want to pretend history never happened, that nothing good ever came during a time where there was bad. There's always going to be bad in the world. You can't pretend that every single thing that existed during bad periods somehow becomes moot and irrelevant and should be canceled. This is a dangerous way to be. And what we're talking about here really at its core are the tenets of Marxism and communism, right? That everything is fundamentally wrong about society. Everything is backwards. The family, the church, the writers, history, everything needs to go. And because they're moving towards some false utopian society that's never going to exist. What's the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to wake up one day and you're not going to recognize the country that we live in. They're going to seize all of our rights. And I don't want to live in that society, which is why I encourage people to wake up now, because this fight and this threat that we're facing, this Marxist battle that we're in the midst of right now, is very, very real and has severe long-term implications.
Candace, you talked a moment ago about kids learning this critical theory in school. I mean, they're being spoon-fed. Oprah Winfrey signed a deal with Lionsgate and that New York Times journalist responsible for the 1619 Project. And this will examine the legacy of slavery via the lens of 1619 in television and film. And this all began with an issue of the New York Times Magazine in 2019 to mark the 400th anniversary of slavery on the continent. Two questions. What do you make of the 1619 Project? And are we going to see a new African American history here? Is that what this is?
It is. That's exactly what it is. They want to pretend that none of the real stuff that actually happened happened. You're seeing this even. Forget the 1619 Project. Beyonce signed a deal with Disney, and she's coming out with a visual album called Black is King, right? And she's got white servants serving her, and it's all about the black story. I mean, what is that? What are we actually doing here? You're trying to, in a weird way, erase white America, pretend that the colonists never happened, that none of this stuff ever happened. And it's so fundamentally dishonest, because this stuff that they're so angry about, it happens everywhere in the world, right? You want to talk about slavery? Slavery happened everywhere in the world. And it wasn't an institution that was put together by white men. It was an institution that was put together by black men, by Muslim men, by black and brown people. This institution was put together. It was white men that were the first to end and abolish slavery. Britain, followed by France, followed by America, being the first countries that put
we just changed the way we thought of it.
Right? You want to talk about people saying
You made people want to be a slave.
King,
Is what we
we were
did.
kings and queens in Africa. Such a fraudulent narrative, as we were sold into slavery by our ancestors for things as meaningless as gin and mirrors. Right? People don't know this stuff. And what happens in Africa today? There still are slaves, Raymond. There still are slaves. If you want to actually get impassioned and angry about something, go deal with the live slave auctions in Libya. Go deal with the fact that in Lake Volta, in Ghana, they have something like 20,000 child slaves working, doing fishing and things for people that are being rescued. This is really a sign of our remarkable privilege and our insulation in America. These people don't know what happens outside. They don't understand how tremendously fortunate they are to be in the United States of America at this time. If you are a Black American and you are breathing in America today, you are a part of the most privileged, elite Black people and white people that have ever walked the face of the planet today. And that's the truth that they don't want to grapple with.
Candace Owens, thank you for your insight. I hope you'll come back. Candace Owens' new book, Blackout, hits stores.
Wow. Hello. Can you guys hear me all the way in the back? Yes. I love you guys too. All right, I'm going to get right into this. So I said to my husband the other day that it's become apparent to me over these last few years that the left has no idea that the world did not begin in 1776. 3 years of traveling the country and facing off with hysterical liberals, and that is my scientific conclusion, that they haven't the slightest idea that anything exists or that anything ever existed outside of the United States of America. Let me give you a recent example. You will all recall when the left, which in my opinion has morphed into a doomsday cult, feverishly and accurately predicting that everything President Trump says or does will end America. But you all recall when they once again prophesized our doom when Iranian terrorist Soleimani was slain in a military operation. You remember that, right? This is the beginning of World War III, their headlines read. They promised us we were going to head straight into World War III. It was a remarkable day because it was a day that we watched Democrats and liberals, the ones who have been shrieking about sexism, misogyny, and the need for more feminism, turn into passionate defenders of the state of Iran, the country whose constitution quite literally states that a woman's life is worth half that of a man's, a country where women are punished by law for up to 10 years in prison if they are caught not wearing a veil, suddenly became the apple of the left's eye. Of course, the war never happened, but in the midst of their delirium, a tweet went out from resident anti-American Colin Kaepernick. And the tweet read, exactly, and I quote, "There is nothing new about American attacks against black and brown people for the expansion of American imperialism. America has always sanctioned and besieged black and brown bodies. American militarism is the weapon wielded by American imperialists to enforce its policing and plundering of the non-white world," end quote. Fascinating. A rant about black and brown bodies being imperialized, a word that I must assume Colin either doesn't know the definition or the history of, used in defense of Iran. And so, of course, you know me on Twitter. I felt it necessary to mention to Colin, gently, of course, you know me, I'm very nice on Twitter, to mention to Colin that that particular country of brown and black bodies used to be known as Persia, and rather unfortunately for his implied thesis regarding their perpetual victimhood at the hands of white people, Persia used to be an empire, quite literally an imperial dynasty for 200 years, almost as long as America has been alive. It was once the most powerful state in the world, imperializing regions from Egypt to India, regions of, you guessed it, black and brown people. And while I have to say that I was not shocked to learn that Colin Kaepernick has evidently never picked up a historical textbook, I will say that I was shocked that he hadn't at the very least seen the movie 300. That little movie where the black and brown bodies are looking to imperialize the white bodies in Greece. Maybe he thought it was all made up and fiction. Or maybe Colin Kaepernick isn't earning millions to tell the truth. Maybe he's being paid millions to convince black and brown bodies that they are oppressed, to keep them angry and confused and uneducated. Which could explain why, On Thanksgiving Day of last year, Colin tweeted, I quote, "The U.S. government has stolen over 1.5 billion acres of land from indigenous people. Thank you to my indigenous family. I am with you now and always," end quote. Holiday tweets are his favorite, by the way. On the 4th of July, he tweeted, What to the American slave is your 4th of July?" Co-opting, by the way, a Frederick Douglass quote and stripping it of its original context to convey the idea that blacks owe this country not a moment of celebration. I'm talking about Colin because the picture that he is painting is clear, and I'm using him as an example because it is so in line with the overall opinion that we are seeing come from the left today. An opinion that America is a horribly racist country whose guilt cannot be untethered from her period of slavery. Which is interesting because if slavery is an everlasting sin from white men, why was Colin so clearly able to forgive that sin from American indigenous people, his quote-unquote family? That's an inconvenient truth. You see, the sin of slavery was not brought to this continent by white Europeans, as the left would have us imagine. Slavery existed everywhere in the world, including here since the dawn of humanity. Different Native American tribes weren't sitting around kumbayaing over a fireplace. They were trying to imperialize one another. They would enslave their war captives into labor. They would sometimes sell their own children. They tortured others as a part of their religious rites. And depending on which tribe you were in, cannibalism was even the commonplace. Oh, did cannibalism get lost in Colin's flowery depiction of indigenous people? Yes, before the Europeans ever landed in the Americas, Native Americans routinely cannibalized one another. Most notorious among them, perhaps, was the Aztecs. When the Spanish colonists arrived in Mexico City, they were greeted by piles of over 100,000 skulls belonging to humans that had been sacrificed to the gods. In fact, in one archaeological dig, they found the remains of 42 children, all around the age of 5, who were sacrificed to the rain god. Special days required more sacrifice, by the way. On the inauguration of Aztec's Temple Major, they sacrificed between...
Yeah, but what you're not thinking about is that we just sacrificed 1 million people in the last 3 years with the Lion Mama Kona 19. We sacrifice 350,000 children every year in the United States alone to cancer. We sacrifice, 250,000 a year to diabetes and another 200,000 to obesity that leads to heart attacks. So we do the same thing today. You just don't look at it that way. You don't see medicine and science as another religion, and that's what it is. It's new religions, and we sacrifice our children and ourselves based on this science and medicine, the new religion of today, the new religion of tomorrow.
Liberals in the United States even went so far as to claim that the Native Americans themselves had lied, or rather, more politically correct, had been misunderstood in their own recorded sacred text regarding their cannibalistic practices. Until
like you even mentioned earlier about the abortion, same thing. I mean, it could add a lot of other things too. You add the abortion rate. So if the black population is only 13% of the United States, but the abortion rate is 38% of the United States, and then you look at Asians and whites and Hispanics who are down in the 6 to 12%, 17% at best for whites, that's their abortion rate. And if blacks are 13% of the population, and then figure in Latinos and people of other color and nationalities, and whatever you're left with, and you compare those rates, there is an unfair statistic being developed here, because we do sacrifice our children still to this day. And then as far as cannibalism goes, I'll try to explain that towards the end of the series, but I know you're a meat eater, so, and I am too, don't get me wrong, but I'll try to explain the best I can about what you're talking about, cannibalism, and we eat all the animals of the earth, so it all depends on how you look at it. Tell you what though, we don't eat feline, canine, rodent, ape or beast. We don't eat them, but we do sacrifice them on a pretty regular basis. Those numbers are high too. I want to say we put down hundreds of thousands of dogs every year for no reason. For no reason. We just don't want them running free.
They also, by the
We
way,
don't want them to be free, even though you think it's a
they
free
also, by the
country.
way,
It's
choose to
not.
forget the fact that the first to abolish the practice of slavery was Great Britain.
It's funny, thinking about dogs and cats and stuff, because when I was a kid, we used to have what we thought was freedom in the United States too, because we used to see packs of dogs running around free, as if they were really free. There used to be a lot more cats and dogs running around, and they were fine. They'd cause trouble once in a while, but for the most part, they traveled in packs. They took care of each other. They looked out for each other, and they were fine. Not until humans started training them all to, kill each other and shit like that, and then putting those dogs out there, and then we had problems. But even still, then they were not. They were better off on their own than they were with human influence. The canine.
Surely, that must be the reason why on the 4th of July, Colin also
But no,
tweeted,
they had to take our freedom too.
Celebrate independence.
They were forced into our
They had
freedom.
intentionally robbed our ancestors of theirs. To find my independence, I went home, end quote. He was referring to Africa. Colin took a trip to Ghana because, in his own words, he wanted to see what his people saw before they were forcefully taken away. And I really want to pause and drive this point home, so let me restate it. In lieu of celebrating his independence in America, Colin got on a plane and went to Africa, a continent upon which he found better grounds for celebration, which is interesting. It's interesting because currently, today in Africa, there are close to 700,000 slaves, and this is going to shock the heck out of the too woke to see what's in front of them crowd, but they are not being enslaved by white people. They are being enslaved by other Africans. Child soldiers, human trafficking, forced labor all exist within the same sub-Saharan region that the transatlantic slave trade took place. African bodies are being sold, say like they were being sold then, and they are not being purchased by any country of predominantly white men. It's a wonder that Colin never mentioned that in Ghana today, his beloved country of emotional reprieve from the horror of America, 20,000 children live in slavery to support the fishing industry along Lake Volta. In fact, it was leftist network CNN that covered the story last year when a boy was rescued from slavery and had explained to them that while in captivity, he was made to work tirelessly, and that if the famished children were caught trying to eat the fish, they were beaten so senselessly that they wished that they had never been born. Why didn't Colin mention any of this? Why haven't any of the alleged courageous leaders on black issues of oppression mentioned any of this? I know, because they aren't leaders at all. They're all extortionists. Colin extorted Black America to earn millions. Colin extorted Native Americans to maintain his image, and Colin extorted Ghana for a photo op so he could continue to earn those millions. But Colin wasn't the first, he isn't the only, and he certainly won't be the last. So, to Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, to Nisi Coates, to CNN, to the New York Times, to MSNBC and their anchors, to every single one of you race hustlers who have extorted black pain to line your own pockets, who have blindfolded the black youth against seeing the opportunities that lay beneath their feet here in America, in the land of the free, in the home of the brave, I say this to you. There will be a Blexit, a black exit. You have seen how a man was made a slave. That sentence is the first half of a Frederick Douglass quote. I like it because it rings true now. I have seen how a man was made a slave. I have seen how black Americans have been enslaved to the debate of race, how liberals, how leftists, how Democrats continue to enchain us to this inconsequential debate while robbing us blindly of our family, our faith, and our future through their abhorrent policies. You have seen how a man was made a slave. Then he continues the quotation. And now you shall see how a slave was made a man. To the veterans, and so I say to the veterans of this black ideological civil war, those of us that have survived the constant onslaught and the media thrashings and fight daily to awaken our brothers and sisters, to the patriots who have fought beside us, cheered us on, to my supporters, those of you that have seen me to this point, from just a girl on YouTube with a different idea to the very soon to be published author of the aptly entitled book, Blackout, How Black America Will Make Its Second Escape from the Democrat Plantations. To all of you in this room, I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for experiencing this journey with me, but most importantly, for seeing how this former slave to poisonous liberal ideology was made a woman, was made a patriot, was made an American. May God bless you all.
Owens is the founder of the Blexit Foundation, an organization dedicated to driving conservative principles into urban communities. She's a published author, a speaker, and host of the weekly Candace Owens show on Prager University. Owens exploded onto the scene in the summer of 2017, gaining notoriety through her political vlog series on YouTube. She's since spoken at over 60 American universities, challenging the leftist status quo, insisting that students think beyond the confines of liberal orthodoxy. With over 250 Fox News appearances, any Fox News viewers? Any KUSI viewers? Owens has substantiated herself as a leader among the growing youth conservative movement. Prior to her entrepreneurial pursuits, Owens worked at a private equity firm in Manhattan, serving as vice president. She attended the University of Rhode Island, took executive training courses at NYU Stern School of Business, and Candice views it as her life's mission to help minority groups escape the left's victim narrative. So with that, Candice, are you here? Candace Owens, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Hello, California. It is such a blessing to be here. I wish I had more. I actually move a lot when I speak, but I don't want to knock down these people. First and foremost, thank you guys so much for choosing to spend your evening with me. I really, really, really am so grateful. It never gets old. And I'm so glad to be in California. I had an event about 2 days ago in Napa Valley, which was packed. So many patriots in California, and people forget that California is a state that we need to fight for. And I can say California is the only socialist country I've ever been to. It's amazing. You know, I was traveling with my manager on this trip, and I really strongly dislike Los Angeles. It really is just not the place to be. If you really want to see Democrats take it too far, right? Los Angeles really is the experiment for that. It's gotten so bad. And what bothers me about the liberal elites that are in Los Angeles is that they pretend like they've created a heaven. When they lecture the rest of us about how we need to live, you would expect when you arrive in Los Angeles for things to be beautiful, for things to be clean, right? They lecture us, oh, you can't have plastic straws, but everything plastic can be found on the streets of Los Angeles. Absolutely filthy. It's filthy. It really is. The airport, by the way, is a human rights violation, right? Completely. LAX I cannot do. It's like going to the emergency room on a Friday night. So it's the best way to describe it. It's crazy. It's absolute madness. It's not like that anywhere else in the country, but this is what Los Angeles has become. This is what California is becoming because for too long, progressives, which I always say, there's something about progressives that it always leads to regressiveness in our society. Like if you want to go backwards, hire a progressive, right? It's gotten ridiculous. And when I got into this, you know, I didn't know what to expect. I was just a girl on YouTube, but I can tell you what I definitely did not expect. I did not expect that by saying to people, I had a very simple message. I wasn't a hardcore Trump girl. I wasn't saying, oh, I'm a Republican, everyone needs to be Republican. I just had this feeling that maybe not every single person in America is a racist, right? That was it. It was pretty simple. And it's so funny to go around the country and to meet so many people and they say you're so brave, you know, you do such goodness, and I really do feel